Hi, my name is Gary Cummins, and thank you for watching my presentation. I'm coming to you from a small horse racing town called Newmarket, which is just outside Cambridge in the United Kingdom. I live overseas because I teach for the United States Department of Defense Education Activity. I serve military dependents on one of our Air Force bases called RAF Lakenheath. This project, Assistive Technology Inquiry and Findings, is for SPED 5023, Dr. Booth, at Southeastern Oklahoma State University. Before I begin, I'll touch on the standards that this project will cover. I hope that the viewers of my presentation walk away with a stronger understanding of assistive technology, or AT, for students with inattention and hyperactivity. Through this presentation, I hope that you will see that I cover CEC 5.2, 3.2, and 5.3. For the first part of this project, I'll touch on my inquiry question. All educators have experience dealing with or working with students who have inattention and hyperactivity. It's commonplace in schools now. So, because I have several students right now in my classroom who have diagnoses of ADHD, I wanted to know what forms of AT are most effective for engaging inattentive and/or hyperactive students. For the second, part B of my presentation, I'm going to talk about the tools that I found through research to be proven to work well with students who have inattention and hyperactivity. Each student's IEP team must consider AT as a possible tool to engage the student in meaningful learning. In this section, I will go over just 4 types of assistive technology that can be used with kids who have ADHD. Self-monitoring, student prompting, auditory engagement, and visuospatial working memory. Assistive technology for self-monitoring is a new powerful tool. Knowing is power. When students can see patterns in their own behavior, educators can inspire self-improvement. According to ALT 2014, using tablets with self-monitoring apps can help students develop practices of self-regulation and increase their time on task. Once undesired and target behaviors are defined, self-monitoring apps can track student progress. This is the same with all behavior modification. First define, then intervene. So this intervention can help students track their own progress. And for example, if you were tracking off-task behavior, it can easily be recorded by a student with a tap of their finger. Not only is this a form of assistive technology and intervention, but it can also be used to evaluate the effectiveness of other interventions. Like if you gave a kid a fidget during whole group instruction, if you want to see if that fidget is increasing time on task, you can have the student track their own behavior on the app. So, paper pencil methods, I used to use those as a special educator for self-monitoring, and I would love to try these apps now because kids love tablets. So that's instant buy-in. These forms of AT can highlight patterns of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. The teachers can use this data to enhance their teaching of coping strategies. Some examples of apps include iConnect and Score It for iPads. Regardless of the app, students can easily use touchscreens to record their own behavioral progress. AT for student prompting. Sometimes students are unaware of their behavior. Hyperactivity and inattention can just kind of be a part of a child, and they don't realize that they're losing focus and that it's impacting their education. So we can promote and prompt kids to return to tasks with verbal prompting, but that tends to be a little bit um, problematic because other students can notice, and the child that you're prompting could end up with self-esteem issues. So, according to Finn, Ramsey, and Scott 2015, assistive technology can cue kids to remain on task. Distractibility in the classroom, it's going to happen. It's unavoidable. But rather than verbally prompting kids all day long, we can use assistive technology to prompt them. A device called a watchminder is discreet. It looks just like a watch. Kids wear it on their wrists, and it silently vibrates at intervals set by the teacher to remind the student to remain on task or to return to task if they're off task. A form of self-monitoring that is vibrating, it's silent, it cues the kid, and it really increases the independence from adults. So this form of assistive technology is something that I would love to try in my first grade classroom with some of my kids. I need to look into purchasing these. Assistive technology for auditory engagement. Fun fact about this, when I was doing my research, I found this article, and one of the authors, Dr. Witten, was my professor and student teaching supervisor at Western Michigan University. It was nice to read her article. Anyway, I digress. Kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they tend to miss out on vital information in class. If a topic is not highly motivating, they can struggle to engage or maintain engagement. By activating two senses, seeing and hearing, students who struggle to retain information can retain more. So, according to Estes and Witten 2011, assistive technology can be used to help students retain information while reading if read aloud software is utilized. Audiobooks are great to use with kids with inattention and hyperactivity because the book can be stopped and allow them a chance for movement or reconnection with the activity. Also, it allows them to hear what they're reading. So if they're not processing or they're daydreaming or something like that, it allows them the flexibility of hearing and reading at the same time. Smaller handheld devices can be loaded with verbal instructions to repeat multi-step directions. Um, I think this would be very useful for with some kids so they can have repeated directions from teachers, maybe even procedures or rituals that are scripted by a teacher so they can engage more independently just listening to a device. Read aloud for students with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is key. Really, all kids learn well through read aloud from adults. So, if attention is fading while a kid's reading, why not have that support there for them to have that read aloud? So, some examples are audiobooks for iPad, Kurzweil 3000, and MP3 players. The final topic I'll cover, or piece of assistive technology that I'll cover, is for visuospatial working memory development. Students with ADHD are often prescribed stimulant medications by their doctors. Although medication can improve their ability to cope with the disorder, I found this quite interesting. It does not necessarily translate into working memory or developing that part of the brain. So I found that interesting. According to Kakalia and Dragas 2015, students with ADHD can have limited working memory. Put simply, they have a hard time remembering what they learn because information doesn't transfer over to long-term memory because of distractibility. So that's really interesting that distractibility and not having those opportunities for engagement and repeated engagement to move memories over prevents kids from learning. So this strategy uses video games, which All kids love video games. So it uses video games, but the video games are specially designed to develop the working memory portion of the brain. Research concludes that these types of video games improve working memory more effective than stimulant medications alone. That was the most fascinating thing I think I found during this research. That stimulant medications more or less mask the symptoms, but they don't have an enduring effect on the skills the child learns. So we need to be working on visuospatial working memory development as well, even if a kid is medicated. So kids with ADHD can lose interest. However, the video games can keep their interest longer. And the example given by the authors of this article was Robo Memo. So I'd like to really check this out. As a general educator, I'm not sure if I would be able to do this, but if it seems like a good intervention for some of my kiddos, I might suggest that my special education counterparts look into this strategy. Very fascinating stuff. Understanding the methodology of using AT for students with inattention and hyperactivity disorders is important. Yes, IDEA says that all students should be considered for AT if they have an IEP. However, assistive technology is commonly thought of for students with low incidence disabilities, but it can be just as useful for students with ADHD. So in this section, 2 research articles that support students with ADHD are using, rather, assistive technology for students with ADHD will be reviewed. The first article by Balk 2016 says that, yes, federal law requires AT, however, it's often forgotten for students with ADHD. In the study, it was very fascinating that 9.3 of students with SLD have access to audiobooks, where only 1.4% of students with ADHD have access to audiobooks on their IEP accommodations. Moreover, 35.3% of students with SLD have access to calculators, where only 18.2% of students with ADHD have the same access. This trend could be extrapolated out to nearly every type of assistive technology covered by this author. Put simply, students with ADHD are often thought of as behavior problems rather than academic strugglers. It could be a little bit of both. However, we're required to support those learners with assistive technology if it's appropriate. I already listed a few examples in the first or the second part of this presentation that would be great for kids with ADHD, but maybe not so great for students with lower incidence disabilities. So that just goes to show assistive technology is not all in one box. It can serve really anybody. So special education teachers and paraprofessionals are commonly assigned to students with ADHD. Their service times are increased on their IEPs, when really their independence could be better supported with assistive technology rather than more adult attention. The next steps offered by this author call for a reduced reliance on students with ADHD on adults by using assistive technology. They want more research done on that topic to make sure that educators have the best information moving forward. The second article I reviewed by the same author and several of their colleagues in 2012 said that there are many forms of assistive technology schools use for students with disabilities. Since schools are forever facing budget issues, they can look from within, and they call this like the tape method. So these authors established a 4-part test to determine if assistive technology is available in the school that doesn't require new purchases. So is existing technology transportable, available, practical, and engaging? Tape. So for example, Existing computers can be used for video modeling, so students with ADHD can learn desired behavior via peer example. Radios can be used to play music, which helps some students with ADHD focus. Assistive technology can be used for other demographics of students, might be appropriate for students with ADHD too. So, for example, of a low tech um, form of assistive technology, a visual schedule can be used for students who have autism spectrum disorder, but it could also be used for a kid with ADHD. So, not all assistive technology is high tech. So, some things like sensory items can help kids with ADHD focus and relax. So, really, it just goes down to the individual and what they need and what's available in the school. Here are my references. And here are the standards. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.